Hi guys, hope everyone is doing good and hope you had a good weekend. When I say a good weekend, it means I'm hoping that you had a productive weekend. As I keep telling, weekends are days for revisions. Come what may, make sure that you have done your revisions for whatever you have studied for that week. If you don't do this, if you procrastinate, then you will have lack of confidence. Your confidence to face this exam comes from revisions, and you have to dedicate 1 or 2 days in a week for revisions. And the best days in a week to dedicate are weekends. So I hope you people are revising, and I hope you are able to get that confidence through the revisions. Okay, and thank you for all the feedbacks in the comment sections. We are going to make sure that we implement each one of those requests incrementally within our program. Okay, now on 18th of December 2023, let us start off with news in 30 minutes and look at some of the most important issues of the day. Today on 18th December marks the 17th year of the implementation of Forest Rights Act. Forest Rights Act was implemented in 2006. So it has been 17 years of implementing this watershed act in India. So the first issue that we are going to learn is about the Forest Rights Act of India 2006. So let us get on to it right away. The first issue, as I told you, is an uphill struggle to grow the Forest Rights Act. Okay, political opportunism, forestry resistance and bureaucratic apathy have affected the act, which seeks to create a more democratic structure for forest governance. Now, the author obviously is pointing out the challenges in implementation of Forest Rights Act. Okay. Now, the reason why author is giving such negative, connotation towards it is because of its implementational, lacuna that is there in this act. So, before I discuss the challenges, one thing what I wanted to tell is this article, I would rate this article as a 5-star article because the article is written in the lines of how an UPSC aspirant should study. Okay, it has the historical background, then it has the legislative setup, and then it has the challenges. So it is giving all the 3 dimensions of a concept. Usually there is very less articles that give such very good dimensions within the the article. They usually just go on telling about one perspective many times. But this is a very good article, and hence such articles should always be read as well as written in your notes. Okay, so to coming to the article as such, as I told you, today marks the 17th year of the implementation of what we call as the scheduled tribes and other traditional forest dwellers, recognition of Forest Rights Act 2006. Okay, so this is the act that we had implemented in 2006. Okay, the reason why this act is very, very important, it is a watershed movement, is because it is an act that focuses on the socio-environmental legislation. It is considered as a socio-environmental legislation because it has the social angle of protecting the scheduled tribes as well as the forest dwellers of India, and also it has a connotation of protecting the environment. Because it has both the dimensions, it is one such very good act that addresses the socio-environmental legislation of India. The second reason why it is very, very important is it seeks to create a democratic bottom-up. It seeks to create a democratic bottom-up forest governance. Bottom-up forest governance. However, the noble intentions of this act is kind of overshadowed by the lack of spirit in its proper implementation, which is unfortunate. We will get back to that when the time comes. But however, this is the entire introduction. The introduction is this act is a watershed act in India because it is a socio-environmental legislation that seeks to create a democratic bottom-up forest governance. Okay. Now, the first aspect is this act tries to undo what we call as historical injustice. And this historical injustice was created to the tribes or forest dwellers It was created towards the tribes or forest dwellers by the colonial policies. The colonial policies that were introduced changed the relationship between forest and tribes. How? We are going to check now. The first point that the author says is forests were now seen as a place of timber resources. Okay, forests were seen as places of timber resources, and because timber became the resources, shifting cultivation was banned. When shifting cultivation was banned, all the forest dwelling community that dependent on it were facing a lot of problems. So this is the first historical injustice. Forests being seen as timber resources, and hence shifting cultivation was banned. The second is whatever survey and settlement were done on agricultural lands, this survey and settlement were in favor of the state. What they call as eminent domain. It was done on the principles of eminent domain. What do you mean by eminent domain? It means all forest lands or agricultural lands within the forest belong to the state. That is unfortunately the second historical injustice that were done to the tribes as well as the forest dwellers. The third is they wanted to ensure that there is constant labor that is there for forest operations, because you needed a lot of labor to cut trees and for logistical purposes. What the colonial policies did is they created what they call as forest villages. They created a concept called forest villages. After creating the concept called forest villages, now the land to this forest villages were leased by the colonial power, that is the Britishes. They leased the land to these forest villages, and for leasing this land, in return the Adivasis had to provide labor, and this was bonded labor or it was forced labor. Okay, in this way, by creating forest villages and by leasing land to these Adivasis, they created something called bonded labor, wherein if you want to take the land for cultivation, then you had to supply your labor for the forest bureaucrats. So that is basically the idea. So in this way, forest villages were created to get that extra labor. Okay, this is the third historical injustice done by the colonial policies. The next is what I told you is since forests were considered as state property, state property, any forest produce, okay, or all forest produce that were there within the forest had come under the control of the had come under the control of these Britishers. Okay, so all forest produce were now inaccessible. All forest produce were inaccessible to the tribes. That is the the fourth important historical injustice. Now what happens if this state property, if the entire forest is decided as a state property, then if you give any kind of leverage to these local communities, all leverage to the local communities can be seen as privileges, and for giving these privileges you always can take a rent. Okay, so this is what was the relationship that transformed between the tribes and forests. Before, the tribes felt that the forest belonged to them and the forest produce was something that they could use freely because of their right on the forest. But because now the forest became the state property, now because of that the forest produce were also under the state's property. So everything became inaccessible, and whatever little accessibility was given, that was given in the realms of privileges for which rent was taken. Okay, and the last historical injustice that was done is the tribes or the forest dwellers were decided that they had no rights to manage the forest. Okay, they had no rights to manage the forest. Okay, they were seen as outsiders within their own houses. This is the greatest injustice of all. Okay, so overall, these were some of the historical injustices that were done by the tribes. These were the historical injustices that were done to the tribes and forest dwellers through or via the colonial policies during British rule over India. Okay, now post-independence also, what Indian government did is, Indian government brought out two laws. One is the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, wherein it created protected areas like national parks or wildlife sanctuaries. And the second is it brought about Forest Conservation Act 1980, where it created strict laws for forest conservation. Now both these laws were kind of antithetical, or were kind of not helping the forest dwellers, because it prohibited the activities of forest dwellers and it saw the tribes or forest dwellers as encroachers. This again added to the historical injustice. So I can add that this is the sixth injustice done to the tribes of forest dwellers in independent India. Okay, so these were some of the historical injustices that were done. Now to overcome this historical injustice came what we call as Forest Rights Act 2006. The full name of it is, as I told you in the beginning, Scheduled Tribes and Other Forest Dwellers Recognition of Forest Rights Act 2006. Now this broadly, this Forest Rights Act tries to provide first of all it acknowledges the historical injustice done. Acknowledging the historical injustice done, it tries to provide the necessary forest rights. It provides the necessary forest rights to 1. Scheduled tribes, and 2. It produces forest rights to the other forest dwellers. Okay, so these are the two groups that is provided forest rights in order to overcome the historical injustice. Okay, now this Forest Rights Act will try to reduce, or it will try to reduce the historical injustice, or will try to provide the forest governance. I'm using two words: to reduce historical injustice, okay, plus to increase or to provide a bottom-up forest governance, NANC governance, okay, to reduce historical injustice and to produce the bottom-up forest governance. It has provided three important provisions. It has provided three important provisions in the Forest Rights Act to reduce historical justice and providing bottom-up forest governance. To increase bottom-up forest governance, it has provided three important provisions. Those provisions can be termed as: 1. Providing individual forest rights. The second is community forest rights. Okay, and the next is participatory and decision-making rights. Okay, so these are broadly the three rights provided by the Forest Rights Act 2006. When I say individual rights, it means that whoever or any individual who has had an habitat or was cultivating the land within the forest before December 2005. Before December 2005, if any individual was living in an habitat of the forest or was cultivating within that particular forest, then that individual will get the rights of that particular land. This is what is known as individual forest rights. So this is the one aspect that will represent that is individual forest rights. The next is community forest rights. This is the entire village. As I told you, there were forest villages that were created within the forest in order to exploit the labor. So according to FRA, these forest villages have to be converted into revenue villages. They have to be converted into revenue villages, and they have to be given full rights on that particular land. When I say full rights, the community's rights over the forest has to be recognized. Community rights over the forest has to be recognized. Okay, that is the community rights, community forest rights. Okay, now when I say community forest rights has to be recognized, it involves not only the usage of forest resources, but also it involves conservation of forest resources. They can take part in usage as well as they can take part in conservation of forest. So overall, that community will get its right on a particular land of the forest. Okay, and the last is participatory or decision making rights. So participatory or decision making rights is basically, if let us say that they had to for the sake of wildlife conservation, let us say that they are building some national park and they have to rehabilitate the people within the forest, or let us say that they have to build some type of an infrastructure, and for this they have to convert the land, that is forest conversion is required. In either of the case, if the people within the forest have to be rehabilitated, or if such projects has to happen, they have to take or they have to seek the advice or recommendation of the community that is residing there. Okay, they have to seek the recommendation of the community that is residing there. Now this shows that this shows that the voice of the tribes and scheduled tribes within the forest is very important if there has to be something that has to come up within the forest. This was again reiterated in a Supreme Court judgment called Niyamgiri case. In Niyamgiri case also the Supreme Court told that the advice of the tribes residing in the mountains has to be taken before you convert the forest for other purposes like mining or deforestation or wildlife conservation. Whatever it is, if you have to rehabilitate the land, you have to take the permission of the house. So these were the three important provisions that is provided in the Forest Rights Act 2006. So I hope you got the importance of this act. Unfortunately, now let us focus on the challenges. Okay, the first and the foremost challenge is this act is mainly seen as encroachment regularization scheme. This is unfortunately seen as encroachment regularization scheme. So when they look at this like with this perspective, it seems that every forest dweller is illegally trying to acquire land. Which is not true. And unfortunately, this way of looking at these tribes and forest dwellers have led for the distrust between the forest bureaucracy as well as the tribes residing in the forests. Okay. The second problem is the claimants who are claiming for the rights. The claimants are put under enormous hardships. They are put under enormous hardships. The example given is one, they are subjected to faulty and non-transparent rejections. One is they are subjected to faulty and non-transparent rejections. The second is they have been imposing absurd digital processes. They have been, for them to get the claim of ownership, the tribes are being imposed to absurd digital processes. Now, example is you're asking a digital approval that to be done in areas that have poor connectivity. Okay, a very good example that the author gives is One Mitra software in Madhya Pradesh. Now, when you put these tribes into digital processes in an area where they don't have literacy, there is no digital connectivity, then obviously you're imposing a kind of hardship on these claimants. This is the second problem. The third problem is the biggest lacuna of all. Okay, the third problem is the biggest lacuna of all. For an extent, the forest bureaucracy is okay with granting individual forest rights. They are okay with granting individual forest rights. But when it comes to community forest rights, the forest bureaucracy has not been helpful in granting the community forest rights. They feel that this will lead to devolution of their power. And by leading to devolution of their power, they will lose their purpose of existence within the forest. So with that perspective, the community forest rights have not been awarded thoroughly by the forest bureaucracy of our country. So these are the three important challenges that we have in implementing the Forest Rights Act. Finally, the conclusion is Maharashtra, Odisha and Chhattisgarh recently has done this. So Maharashtra, Odisha and Chhattisgarh are the only states to recognize CFRs substantially. Look at this. Only 3 states in India have recognized the community forest rights substantially. Other states are lagging behind in this implementation. This shows the overshadowing of the forest bureaucracy over the rights of the tribes. Okay, so I hope you understood this particular act in detail. So we are celebrating the 17th year of implementation of the Forest Rights Act 2006, which is a socio-environmental legislation which was seeking to create a democratic bottom-up forest governance. You learned 6 important reasons why historical injustice was done against the tribes by the colonial policies, and also you learned what are the 3 important provisions to undo the historical justice that was met by the tribes and forest dwellers. However, you also learned about a few challenges that are there in implementation of this act. So this article, as I told you, has been very beautifully written, and the credit goes to the author to give such elaborative and very detailed explanation of this particular act. So with that, let us go on to the next issue of the day. The next issue, again, I would rate this article a 5-star. The reason this article is given in Hindu, as I told you, this article is in line with UPSC preparation, because this article not only gives a background, this article also gives the current status, and also this article gives the consequences. Okay, such articles are very rare to come by. Such articles shows clarity on the minds, or clarity in the minds of the author, and hence you have to appreciate those facts as well as make a detailed notes out of it. Okay, now one person, one vote, one value. Okay, along with addressing quantitative dilution of vote value, the next delimitation commission needs to address qualitative dilution so that minorities are represented more adequately. Okay, so this author is using two important keywords. One is quantitative dilution and another is quantitative dilution. Okay, there are two important keywords that you should understand. The next is the delimitation commission, which we have spoken so many number of times in our previous videos. If anyone wants to go back and read it, just look at the thumbnail which says delimitation commissions and you can go back and look at it. You also have the timestamp that is there within the video, so you can go directly and watch that video. Okay, so also this article talks about delimitation commission. Overall, what this article does is, this article tries to answer how delimitation commission, if I have to write a question, how delimitation commission plays a major role in strengthening, delimitation commission plays a major role in strengthening or weakening democracy. Okay, delimitation commission plays a major role in strengthening or weakening democracy. If I put this question, how? Then this article has written a very beautiful points to explain how important the delimitation commission is in playing a role in strengthening or weakening democracy. Now let us see how the delimitation commission plays a role in strengthening or weakening democracy. So how do they play a role? They play a role in two ways. One, as I told you, one can be quantitative devolution. Okay, the second type is qualitative devolution. One is quantitative devolution, another is qualitative devolution. What do you mean by quantitative devolution? It happens, quantitative devolution happens when one vote receives unequal weightage. It happens when one vote receives unequal weightage due to huge deviations in the population among the constituencies. I'll repeat, quantitative devolution happens when one vote receives unequal weightage. Okay, when one vote receives unequal weightage due to huge deviations in the population among the constituencies. This is what is known as quantitative devolution. And qualitative devolution happens when the voters' chance of selecting a representative of their choice, is reduced by gerrymandering. Okay, is reduced by gerrymandering. So when this happens, voters' chance of selecting a representative of their choice is reduced by gerrymandering, then this is known as qualitative devolution. What is gerrymandering? It is redrawing of boundaries. To favor a candidate or party. Redrawing of boundaries to favor a candidate or party. Okay, so I'll repeat, quantitative devolution is when one vote receives unequal weightage. See, quantitative, one vote is receiving unequal weightage due to deviations in the population among the constituencies, then it is known as quantitative devolution. Example I will give is, if you take in Uttar Pradesh, one MP, one member of the parliament is able to represent 2.53 million people, Okay, whereas if you take Tamil Nadu, one constituency's member of the parliament is representing 1.84 million. Now look at this. In UP, the one person is representing 2.53 million, and in Tamil Nadu, one MP is representing 1.84 million. This can be considered as quantitative devolution. That is, you are trying to, not devolution, dilution. Sorry, it is not devolution. I'm really sorry. It is dilution. Okay, this is known as quantitative dilution. Okay, so basically what you're trying to do, you're trying to deviate the amount of population that one MP or one representative is handling. Okay, so this 2.53 million is present in UP, this 1.84 million is in Tamil Nadu. This is a type of quantitative dilution. Okay, the next is qualitative dilution. Okay, the qualitative dilution, an example that I want to give is see, this is just an example that I'm giving. If there is a constituency, now you divide that constituency to two constituencies such that the minorities within the constituencies will be divided. When the minorities within the constituencies will be divided, then this is known as qualitative dilution. Okay, qualitative dilution. So basically, qualitative dilution, there has also been a case in India where third delimitation commission. Okay, third delimitation commission that was set up in 1972 to 76. This is accused of creating qualitative dilution amongst SCs. Now this is not told by the author, this is told by the National Commission. This is told by the National Commission on Review of Working of the Constitution. Okay, this is told by the National Commission on the Review of Working of the Constitution. Okay, so this is what is qualitative devolution. So they say, to just give you a summary of what is quantitative dilution and qualitative dilution. Quantitative dilution is when one MP is handling huge populations on one side, whereas the same MP on the other state is handling unequal and less number of population. Look, there is dilution of quantity. On one side, the same member of the parliament is handling more population. On the other side, the same member of the parliament is handling less population. This is known as quantitative dilution. So, when one vote receives unequal weightage due to huge deviations in the population among the constituencies, this is known as quantitative dilution. The next is qualitative dilution. Voters' chance of selecting a representative of their choice is reduced due to gerrymandering. Now see, if I take a constituency and let's say that there is X is the minority that is there in this particular constituency. If I divide this particular constituency in such a way that X gets equally divided amongst the constituencies 1 and 2. First of all, they are minorities. On top of that, I am dividing the constituencies into two parts so that X also gets equally divided. Then this X, who are the minorities, will not get a chance to represent their, to select their representative because their numbers are further diluted. So this is something that is also accused by the third delimitation commissions regarding SCs, that is scheduled castes. The third delimitation commission is said to have been, for SCs, it is said that they have done some type of qualitative dilution, and this was said by the National Commission on Review of Working of the Constitution. Okay, so this is what is quantitative dilution as well as qualitative dilution. So this is how. See, delimitation commission, why is delimitation commission important is, if delimitation commission will make sure that the quantitative dilution should not happen, the qualitative dilution should not happen. If it makes sure that this quantitative and qualitative dilution will not happen, then it will strengthen democracy. But if the same delimitation commission will make sure that the quantitative dilution as well as qualitative dilution is happening, then it will weaken the democracy. So I hope you got the answer to this. Delimitation commission plays a major role in strengthening or weakening democracy. So basically, what is the answer? The answer is, how will it handle its quantitative devolution? How will it handle its qualitative devolution? So this is what is the entire scenario of this delimitation commission. Okay. Now to just give you a background of why we are talking so much about delimitation commission is, see, the reason why it is important for us to know in delimitation commission is, now you see the seats to Lok Sabha as well as the state legislative assembly. The seats to Lok Sabha and state legislative assembly are fixed currently. They are fixed currently by the 84th Amendment Act. Okay, they are fixed currently by the 84th Amendment Act, and it is frozen. The seats are frozen up to 2026. Okay, so up to 2026, the seats of Lok Sabha and State Legislative Assembly are frozen. But post 2026, Delimitation Commission has to be set up, and this Delimitation Commission will use the new census. It will use the new census to demarcate the constituencies. And when they demarcate the new constituencies, it should not result in quantitative dilution. Quantitative dilution. Because if it results in quantitative dilution, it will create North and South distrust as well as North and South India divide. Quantitative dilution should not be done, because see, if you take the new census, the South Indian states have controlled the population, whereas North India has very high levels of population. So if you take population as the only scenario in demarcating the constituencies, it will result in quantitative dilution. So that may create North and South divide. The reason is more seats will go to North India, less seats will come to South India. That will create a North-South divide. That is a kind of quantitative dilution. So Delimitation Commission should not commit this first quantitative dilution. The second is Delimitation Commission should make sure that the seats that are reserved for SCs, the seats that are reserved for STs, the seats that are reserved for women, according to the most recent census, should be taken, and it has to be given representation in accordance to the increase in the population of SCs, STs and women. Okay, so by taking the most recent census, we are taking the expansion or increase in the population of these vulnerable communities, and with the increase in the population, we have to increase the seats of these representatives within the parliament as well as the state legislative assembly. In that way, we are going to make sure that the qualitative dilution is also not going to happen. So this is why the author is talking about the importance of Delimitation Commission in strengthening or weakening democracy. So whatever the Delimitation Commission is going to be set up in the future, the conclusion is the Delimitation Commission should take up to make sure that qualitative as well as quantitative dilution should not happen, and it has to address both the qualitative as well as the quantitative aspects in demarcating the constituencies in this country. Okay, so this is the concluding remark of this article. Again, a very excellently written article which you can read and definitely make notes of. Okay, let us go to the next issue. The next issue is we need agri-friendly policies to stop farmer suicides. Okay, in a demographic chart, farmers take the third spot, that while the unemployed youth and students take the top two positions. Unfortunately, if you want to understand India, look at this. Unfortunately, if you take the demographic chart of India, this is according to the new NCRB report, that is 2023 report. If you take the suicides, the first comes the unemployed youth. Okay, the second comes the students, and the third comes are farmers. Look at this. Unfortunately, all the three are considered pillars of our nation. If India has to project that to be a developed nation by 2047, if this continues to happen under any circumstances, even reaching there GDP wise is useless and hopeless. Okay, there is no point of going with our GDP to become a developed nation by 2047 if this unfortunate and pathetic facts shows that the suicides in India, one is very high, and it is amongst the unemployed youth and students, which we have to reap the benefits of such young demography in India, which we are not. And finally, the foundation and cornerstone of India's food security, India's food self-sufficiency, who our farmers are also committing suicides. Unfortunately, this is the scenario in India. Okay, so now coming to farmer suicides in specific. Okay, according to the NCRB, again, if we take the farmer suicides, according to 2022 year, there were 11,290 farmers who have committed suicides in just 5 large states. Okay, to just rephrase it, in 2022, the total number of farmer suicides has been 11,290, and out of this 11,290, the lion's share, okay, the lion's share of the suicides happen in 5 large states: Maharashtra, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Madhya Pradesh. Look at this. These are all large states. They have huge amount of agricultural land. They are having high, GSDP, and they're considered, a few are considered developed states within India, but unfortunately they account for the largest number of farmer suicides. Now, what is the point of growth if the farmers are committing suicides? We can say with this particular fact that there is complete divergence between what we call as development versus growth. We are seeing growth, but we are not seeing development. This gives you a wide evidence of the fact of this divergence or dichotomy that is happening within India. Okay, so this is what the article talks about. Now, why is this happening? Why are there such huge, farmer suicides that is happening within India? The first reason is debt trap. The reason for debt trap, one is informal credit. Okay, one is informal credit. Because they are dependent on informal credit, this informal credit will charge very high interest rate, which the farmers will not be able to give back. So they'll fall in a debt trap, wherein they have to sell their houses or sell their land, and hence they will not have, they'll lose hope and create, a type of vicious cycle that leads to their suicides. The next is herd mentality. What do you mean by herd mentality? The herd mentality is every farmer, the moment they see a good price for crops, everyone will start growing the same crops. This leads to mass production, and when all the farmer tries to grow the same crop, it will result in price drop. Because of mass production, it will result in price drop. Now this creates market failures, where the market is not able to provide the remunerative price to the farmers. The third is, we learned about market failures. Here next you can learn about crop failure. Because of the increasing effects of climate change, and there is constant irregularities in rainfall, as well as there is increasing temperatures. Because of this, the productivity of crops is decreasing and the overall production is also reducing. And the fourth and the most important, which we feel, is the policies. Policies with respect to, if you can take the guaranteed procurement. See, procurement happens for rice and wheat, but when it comes to other crops, procurement is not done properly. That is the first one. The second is, there is lack of market access. As you know that since agriculture is a state subject and the farmers are forced to sell their produce in APMCs, and APMCs does not provide remunerative prices to the farmers, again it limits market access to the farmers. The next is the perishables. The perishables, since there is lack of storage capacities within the states, now this makes the farmer sell the perishables at a price which may be very less, so that will again hurt the farmers. The next is the lack of contract farming. That is the second one. The next is fragmentation of land holding. Okay, that is another thing. The next is failure of cooperatives. Okay, that is another reason. The next is lack of insurance penetration. See, all these reasons shows that policies play a very, very dominant role in protecting our forests, which we have failed miserably. The reason I feel is there is lack of center and state coordination. The reason is agriculture falls in the state list, and the constant tussle between the center and the states in implementing and lack of coordination has made farmers the victim of this fight. And this has resulted in huge farmer suicides, unfortunately, that we are witnessing within India. So if we have to see some type of respite to these farmers, we have to implement the Model Farming Act that the central government has released, which provides market access, which opens up the market, and also which tries to digitalize the agricultural supply chain ecosystem, which talks about storage, and also which promotes contract farming. So creating a single market in India where one farmer can sell their produce in any part of India is something that we have to aspire for, that will provide and protect the security of the farmers. And this is what is the conclusion. Okay, so I hope this article was helpful. The last article of the day is the government set to roll out rating system for hospitality sector. Now this rating system is important because it is giving a thrust on rural areas. We know that over 65% of the population as well as 47% of the workforce dependent on agriculture. Now this is something that we see in rural areas, and if we have to see development in rural areas, not growth, again I repeat, if we have to see development in rural areas, we have to give a thrust for rural areas. And one such scheme that the government has rolled out is Swachhata green leaf rating. It is a rating system. Okay, it is a rating system that is brought out by the Union Ministry of Tourism. So that is the first one. It's a rating system brought by the Union Ministry of Tourism, and it is aiming to create world-class hygiene and sanitation. Okay, it is aiming to create the world-class hygiene and sanitation, and it is a rating system for hospitality sector. Okay, it is the rating system for hospitality sector. So when I say hospitality sector, it involves hotels, it involves restaurants, and it involves resorts, and it involves homestays. See, these are the hospitality sectors broadly. So having a rating system will create an environment of competitiveness and hence improve the working operation as well as cleanliness, hygiene and sanitation. Okay, it also tries to integrate something called travel for life initiative of Niti Aayog. This is basically inculcating sustainable lifestyle habitats within the tourism sector. So that is what is integrating travel for life of Niti Aayog. Okay, the next is, this is basically trying to focus on rural areas. So it will definitely boost the hospitality, especially in the rural areas, which are very much required. Okay, and initially they plan to pilot project that is implemented in Srinagar in Jammu, and the next is they're also planning it in Neil Island in Andaman and Nicobar. Okay, so overall this is what is something called Swachhata Green Leaf Project, a new initiative of rating project to improve our hospitality sector, especially in rural areas which are very much needed, where most 2/3 of India's population is concentrated. So it definitely will act as engine of development of our rural areas, which can attract huge amount of population with respect to especially hospitality, because of the myriad diverse cultural as well as social systems that is there for people to experience. Okay, so this is another progressive system to improve the rural ecosystem as well as the rural development in India, all right, via the Ministry of Tourism. So these were some of the important issues of the day. I hope you liked it. I hope you are getting clarity as well as you are making notes out of it. If you have loved the video, please don't forget to like, share as well as subscribe, guys. Thank you so much for consistently tuning in, and thank you so much for all the love and support. We have got all the suggestions. We will try to implement each and every suggestions incrementally. However, please be consistent with our our news, and please keep updated with the current affairs. See you tomorrow, guys. Thank you so much. Bye.